tax. Today, we're talking about real estate taxation, and I want to stay focused on just residential properties for today. I'm going to try to explain this in a very simple manner, but full disclosure, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a CPA right now, and this is not legal advice, it's not investment advice, it's not taxation advice. You have to consult your own attorneys, your own accountants for this advice. All right. What all I'm trying to do is figure out, after interviewing people for the past 3 years, how do I simplify some of the concepts that I've learned into a manner that even our kids can understand, right? Because if you can't explain this stuff, how do you master it? And honestly thought about the day I died and what am I leaving for my kids? And I would argue that the information, the relationships, the lessons, that is way more important for us to leave behind for our kids than anything else in the world. So that's what I'm doing. And that's why we're doing this today, talking about specifically real estate taxes. And we're going to talk about a few things that really matter in terms of when you buy your own real estate property, what does that look like and how might that affect your decisions, right? So today I want to talk about some we'll take California, right? Because California has some very unique rules that affects homeowners and investors. And today we'll be talking about Proposition 13, Proposition 58, 60, 60, and 90, 90. I also want to cover why special assessments exist. And I even want to cover the Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act, because that also has some implications if you're buying and selling, especially when you're in a market that has a lot of overseas investors. All right. Now, let's start at the highest level, right? Property taxes. Proposition 13. In California, property taxes are essentially fees you pay each year for owning real estate. That that those taxes essentially pay for your roads, your highways, pay for your police officers, firefighters, etc. That city relies on that money to fund city services. Okay. Now, Proposition 13 limits how high these taxes can go up. So when we hear a lot about, oh, the taxes in California are so bad, yeah, California state income tax is bad. But the benefit or the pro of owning property in California, the pro is the Proposition 13, it caps, right? It limits the property tax rate at about 1% of the home's assessed value when you buy it. And it does not allow the annual increase of that value to go up by more than 2%. So if you've seen, right, during COVID, when properties are going up 10, 20, 30%, that if you bought a property then and you're in a city or a state or a county that allows you to reassess your property taxes based on the market value, your property taxes could have gone up 10, 20, 30%. And that could be really a big hit on your income, on your cash flow, if you're an investor, or on your monthly budget if you're just a regular day, because there's no way your raise was probably 10, 20, 30% that year. It's very unlikely. So this is the advantage, right, of owning a home in California. It's that there's a cap, and even though prices might have skyrocketed, it doesn't mean that your property taxes are going to skyrocket. All right. Now, let's talk about exemptions under Proposition 13. So if you bought your home years ago, your taxable value might stay relatively low, even if your neighbor's home have soared in price, right? Value you determine typically for single family homes the price of your home based on comparable properties, which means that if your neighbor next door has the same exact home, same lot size, same square footage, same year build, same finishes, well, typically an appraiser, a third party appraiser, is going to use that home next door as comparable value. But when it comes to property taxes in California, they are going to look at the acquisition value approach, right? Which is the property is going to be taxed on its value at purchase, plus a small yearly uptick, which cannot be more than 2%. So this allows folks on fixed income, think about your folks on retirement income, they can keep their homes without fear of a giant bill going up every single year, right? It provides some predictability so that lowers the risk for homeowners. Okay. I like to think of the other, let's talk about the other conditions, right? There's Proposition 58, 60, and 90. And these propositions are all state tax law that really talks about what you can or cannot do to the taxable basis when you transfer, right? Proposition 58, they allow to transfer property from one spouse to another or to children without triggering a reassessment. So if you think about generational wealth, right? Your dollar value of your home does not skyrocket when you transfer it to your children, so that your children don't have to pay exorbitant property taxes when they take over ownership of that property, right? It's huge. And that's how you keep all the equity growing and working with you without proportionally increasing the taxable expenses, specifically the property taxes. Then there's Proposition 60 and 90, and those allow certain homeowners, usually over 55, to move to a new home without paying higher property taxes. And this is as long as the home's value, the new home's value, is equal or less, and it's in a county that accepts these propositions. Proposition 60 usually applies within the same county, and Proposition 90 extends to the participating counties. So they might move to another county, and it's not part of the participating counties, then Proposition 90 won't apply. All right. I like to think of it as you're going, you're essentially keeping, it's like you're going to like amusement parks and you're trying to keep, you go into new rides, new parks under that umbrella, but your ticket price is the same, right? These are essentially the same rules that help older adults switch homes without a big tax jump in that situation. All right, let's talk about special assessments. These extra fees exist because if you think about some big master plan divisions or communities, right? Sometimes the local government, they need money to fund those developments, right? Because you got to put in roads, you got to figure out where does water come from, you got to build some parks and maintain those parks, you got to put in sewer, electric, fiber optic cables, blah 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 blah, and it needs to be financed with something. So they might take out a big bond, but then that bond or those expenses are essentially pushed down to the homeowners. And the homeowners have to pay down the special assessment every single year as essentially a way to pay down the interest on the larger loan that the city might have taken out to put in the infrastructure for those homes. Because honestly, water, sewer, they don't just magically appear out of nowhere, right? They have to be in the ground and the city has to put that in place. And this is, to be clear, it isn't on top of regular property taxes. And this is why you got to understand when we talk about mellow rules and special assessments, this is what they're talking about. And this adds into your total cost of ownership. Super important. You had to figure out whether or not that applies to you. All right. Now, let's keep on going. And I want to talk about FIRPTA, the Foreign Investment Real Property Tax Act. And this is relevant because I know tons of people that buy homes with foreign investors. And if you buy a home for a foreign seller, right, this act requires you to withhold part of the sales price for taxes. Now, this percentage might change, it might be 10% right now, but it might change, right? But the idea is that you want to, the government, the US government, want to be able to collect capital gains on that tax, right? Capital gain taxes on the sale, even if the seller lives overseas. So they don't want the money just leaving the country because then they have no way of getting it back, right? Unless obviously the seller meets certain exemptions or the sale is under a certain price, then they could probably reduce or skip the withholding all entirely. But it's almost as if you're going through customs at the airport, right? If you have foreign goods, you might just declare them so that the government knows what to tax, like depending on where that good came from. All right. Super, super important for you to understand this so that you understand what the responsibilities of all sides are. Again, consult a tax professional for this. All right. So now, just be very mindful that there are multiple, when you close on a property, right? Typically, you'll see a pro rata calculation or a proportional calculation. So depending on when you close, right, the seller is responsible for a certain amount of property taxes, and then the buyer will assume property taxes from that day forward. If someone already prepaid a certain amount of property taxes, then the seller will get that back on the closing table. These are all calculated so that it's essentially fair. And that's why you want to look at the final settlement statement, the final closing disclosure, because that usually is how you itemize those property tax prorations. And this is very important, right? Because you want to keep the deal fair based on how long you own that property. Okay. Now, when it comes to minimizing your tax burden, right? Obviously, we talked about all the exemptions, right? So you do some smart tax planning before you, because sometimes if you just pass away and your children inherit your property, that might save your whole family a ton of money, right? So if you're thinking about leaving money for your kids, do some advanced tax planning. Then there's this thing called the 1031 exchange. And it's not where you skip the taxes, it's deferring those capital gains taxes by buying another property of a similar, it's called a like kind exchange, right? So you want to take your gains from a real estate investment and put it into another real estate investment. And that allows you to defer the gains. I mean, some people get away with paying taxes on it ever because you keep deferring it, you keep kicking down the capital gains down the road, down the road, down the road. And essentially, then you just pass on to your kids. And then when your kids inherit that property, they get a step on the basis so they don't actually have to pay taxes on it, right? Wild if you just do some smart tax planning. Now, that's not to say this isn't going to last forever, but you should at least know what's happening out there and how you can take advantage of all of these. Hey, John, thanks for the comment, man. Man, I'm trying to come up with some analogy, but today it's been hard trying to think of analogies for taxes. So if you guys got better analogies, right? I want you to make sure you leave in the comments and just share them with them. I like to think of sometimes with tax planning, if you're a fifth grader, right? I mean, I'm sure fifth graders have seen coupons. I like to think of it as planning a vacation with coupons. The more you know about what's allowed and what coupon you can apply, the more you can save. Same thing with taxes. If you know more regulations, exemptions, those are like coupons. You can use them and apply it so that you pay less in taxes, right? Same concept. Again, help me come up with better analogies. I'm just trying to become a better dad, guys. All right. So hopefully this was helpful, everybody, when it comes to real estate taxation. I know it might sound complicated. Like I got a master's in tax, and yeah, it was dry, but it really helps you understand how tax driven certain decisions are, not just in real estate, but in business in general, right? Tons of multi-billion dollar companies buy other multi-billion dollar companies and structure those transactions as either an asset-based acquisition or a equity-based acquisition, which is a stock acquisition. So it affects so many decisions, and you really want to make sure you understand how it all works. And just understand you don't have to know everything. You can hire other people to figure out how do you apply certain rules and what coupon to apply so that you can save as much in taxes. All right. Hey, I appreciate you all for supporting the Affordable Housing Podcast. It's been 556 days. It's not easy to go live for that many days in a row, but I hope that you can just copy my homework, right? Talk about the same concepts I analyzed today because it's not for you, it's not for me, it's for our kids. And I honestly believe that your kids will thank you one day for the knowledge that you're leaving behind for them. And if you don't know how to start or where to start, just copy my homework because I know how hard it was for me to get started. I appreciate you all so much. Thank you so much for tuning in to live. I always have so much fun doing all this stuff with you. If you guys have topics that you would like me to try explain at a fifth grade level, sometimes it's hard. Sometimes these rules and taxes, you have to be very specific with the conditions. There's no fifth grade version of it, and that's what made today really hard. And I'll admit it, but I'm always looking for feedback. All right. Hope you all spend some quality time with your family and friends today because that's what life is all about. I'll see you all tomorrow for day 557. Have a good one, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow.